You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Tuesday, although, because I keep on doing these later and later because I'm just like more front loaded with the things that I'm doing. Might as well say happy Wednesday. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire, through USA Today Sports Media Group. Sinuses seem better. Jaw still hurts. That's where we're at. So, again, trying to keep this more short and sweet. Today, we're going to get into the news of the day. The news of the day is Blake Corum's car was stolen, which is unbelievable that someone would have that type of audacity. And we're going to get into, I went and looked at every single outgoing, whether it was from this year or previous, how each transfer did at their new school of choice. So we are going to get into all of that. But let's start with this Blake Corum stuff. So it is extremely disappointing to hear that Blake Corum's very signature Camaro was stolen. I have seen him about town when I lived in Ann Arbor, and it's hard to miss him going by. It's a Camaro that's in a black and white camo, like a what you call it, monochromatic camo wrap with his logo on the sides. The logo is relatively new. I think the whole wrap probably is, but it's something that he says, and he had said this before, that his parents got it for him when he graduated high school. It wasn't an NIL thing, but he's used it certainly for NIL because we've seen him use it for some of his endorsements, particularly the Shell station at the corner of Ann Arbor, Saline, and Eisenhower. And it's a recognizable car. So I don't know if this was something that was targeted or if that just perpetrator happened to see it and just decide this is what I want. Certainly it might be unrecognizable if it, I think it is a wrap. If they got the wrap off of it, which I would expect any car thief to do. But it's for someone that is as humble as he is and is as good as of a guy as Blake Corum is, a guy that gives back to the community. I mean, he just won an award on President's Day that he accepted at the Fox Theater with Jesse Jackson for the giving back that he does. It's pretty disheartening, and it's one of those things that makes you feel like the world is dead and cold, right? So hopefully someone finds a way to get that back to him, because that is just awful news that Blake Corum's car, the most recognizable car in that parking lot at Schembechler Hall, is the one that gets stolen. Usually it's not something like that. And it literally is the most recognizable one. Like, I couldn't tell you the only other car who I would recognize, and he's not even there anymore, is the Abioki, because I've talked to him several times while he's been in it. Maybe Donovan Edwards' car, but not nearly to the, like, I'd have to sit there and be like, is that or is that not? That one might be. Are the seats okay? Cool. Whereas Blake Corum's, you can just see from a mile away. So if you hear anything or see anything, get a hold of the Ann Arbor Police Department and let them know. But it was stolen out of a parking garage near where he lives. So very disheartening, very sad. And it's one of those things where, you know, someone who works as hard as he does doesn't deserve to be repaid in kind. Now, granted, if he doesn't get it back, certainly he'll have his pick of being able to go and get something else if he hasn't already. And I'm pretty sure he also has an endorsement with not Randy Wise, but one of those other ones. I think he also has a truck. So that he'll have something to drive, but the sentimental value of the gift that his parents gave him then they said that they worked really hard to get it for him, that can't be replaced. But the good news is he shouldn't be wanting for transportation. You know what I mean? So hopefully the perpetrators are brought to justice and his car is returned to him in good condition. The one thing that I will also say for Blake before we move on, the transfers of it all, so we have 23 guys to cover, is that it's he's taking it so in stride. He quote tweeted the story that was written by Chris Ballas that broke this news. And he basically said, God bless the people that stole it. I hope they enjoy it. And that is not the mentality that I would be sharing. And it's something that I would wish that I could, right? Have that type of mentality. But that, again, speaks to the level of humility, the level of grace, the level of all of that is of just of who he is, that is how he responds to it, at least publicly. So good for him for that. And he's certainly an example to all of us in how even when calamity strikes us, of ways that we can handle it. So that is just awesome. All right, let's move on. I know it's a little early, but we're going to go ahead and get to these transfers and what they did. I'll split them up 12 and 11 or so and see where that takes us. And we'll just discuss it, because I wanted to do that because I saw someone, I do it every year anyway, but I always see, I saw someone that asked who would be that guy, like that Michigan's Joe Burrow. They don't really maybe have one, but they maybe kind of do. We'll get to who that is in just a moment. Before we do that, the NFL playoffs are here. We are really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the number one sports book in America, and that's FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers, if you join today to get started, with $150 in free bets, or join today, not if, just do it. Join today and you get $150 in free bets, guaranteed, when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets, from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets to combine. So football of me. For a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. That's the way I do it. Certainly, you can find me doing that with Eagles and the Eagles and 49ers game. I'm sure I'm probably going to be all over that one, but probably even more so. Chiefs and who are the Chiefs playing? I know I'm rooting for the team the Chiefs playing, I think. Not the Bills. The Bengals. The Joe Burrow of it all. I lost it for a second. I'm going to be putting some ill-advised bets on some things. And then it's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's continue on. I thought it was really interesting just to kind of get into what each of these players have done. And I think some of them I didn't even necessarily know was playing, like the first guy I'm going to mention. He actually texted me like right after midnight on New Year's. And that was Sammy Faustin. And I think he just texted everyone in his address book, but I was sitting there with Clayton Safey in the hospitality suite after the Fiesta Bowl, and we're watching I think we just got done watching the Ohio State loss to Georgia. And so I'm like, I get a text and I'm like, oh, this is probably Sarah or something like that. And I look at it's Sammy Faustin. Happy New Year. He's playing for UMass. He's playing for Don Brown. I didn't know that I think I even wrote it, but I didn't even remember that he transferred. But he got to play in 11 games. He had 3 tackles. So mostly a special teams guy, I believe. I don't know that I looked at the at his snap count like I did most guys, but as he was the first one on my list. But good for him to, especially after his health issue that precluded him from playing, and then he ended up transferring and getting another opportunity. The only disappointing thing is that he didn't matriculate in Ann Arbor, because he was a guy that was getting a lot of love coming out of practice before he went down with his health issue, his undisclosed health issue. Another name of interest is another safety. Another guy, I didn't remember where he went, but I think he actually transferred to Duke initially, and then I guess he transferred again, all within an offseason. That's Jordan Morant. I had no idea he played for the Pirate. He played at Mississippi State last year. He initially transferred to Duke, if memory served. I wrote Duke in and then searched for him on Duke, and then he wasn't there. But he ended up appearing in 13 games. He had 11 tackles. Nothing amazing, nothing terrible. Certainly, I mean, he didn't crack the lineup in Ann Arbor, which is disappointing given he was considered to be the best of those three safeties in his class. But nonetheless, he's got his opportunity, and certainly you have to have a heavy heart for him given that his head coach passed. But yeah, he's there doing his thing in Starkville. This next one is one that we actually saw this year, and that is Jack Stewart, the offensive lineman who came back to Ann Arbor as part of the UConn Huskies. He, I didn't put the amount of games. I believe he played in all of them, but he had 56 snaps for UConn, 15 were on offense, but he was mostly on special teams. So didn't do a lot, but he's part of that rebuild. I believe he's from New Canaan, Connecticut, if memory serves. So it makes sense that he'd go back home and do that. Another UMass guy. This is the one that to me kind of hurts, because it's like, man, this would have been cool if this worked out. I remember being kind of excited about this guy's potential, and it never matriculated. He switched sides of the football, but he's back to offense after dallying on defense for a minute. And that's George Johnson. He ended up transferring to UMass, and I must have written all the articles for these, and I just don't remember because I'm going through a lot of them. It's like, yeah, we know where a lot of these guys went, but like some of these other ones, it's like I don't even remember. But a lot of times, writing an article like that, like they transfer, you get the notification from someone else, quote tweeting it or something like that, and you write it as you're pumping gas or something like that real fast, and it's in one ear out the other. But George Johnson, he actually appeared in 12 games, back at wide receiver. Remember, he was a quarterback out of Port St. Lucie, Florida, and he had 28 receptions for 402 yards and a touchdown. He also had 7 rushes for 4 yards. He attempted 1 pass, which went nowhere, and he had 2 kick returns for 20 yards and had 2 tackles. So that's a heck of a stat line for a guy. Now, here's the thing about UMass. They were definitely really hard up. And granted, I didn't know much about the offensive side, but, I went to a football camp this summer. Don Brown was there, and we talked a little bit to Don Brown. He had lost some weight and whatever. But I talked more to Mike McCray, who he hired as linebackers coach there. And he was like, we got to work cut out for us. We don't have a lot of scholarship players. We are like scraping the bottom of the barrel to put something together here. But he was super excited about the opportunity. So it was pretty cool. Mike McCray coaching linebackers there. But George Johnson, I mean, if you can catch passes, and it sounds like he did a pretty good job of it. 28 catches for 402 yards. Just 1 touchdown, though. Another familiar face, Andre Seldon. He actually came back to Michigan, the state of Michigan, and he played in his hometown of Detroit for the bowl game. Came with New Mexico State. That's one I remembered for sure. But he plays for New Mexico State. He appeared in 12 games, and he did pretty good. He had 44 tackles, 4 passes broken up. He had an interception, and he returned it for a touchdown. He also had 1.5 tackles for loss. So really good for him. He was one of my favorite recruits that cycle. You remember, he was Michigan's first recruit that cycle. Really got things going. It always seems like that first guy, the one that ends up leading the class, ends up transferring somewhere. Not always, but I'm thinking, who am I thinking? Who's the one that ended up going to West Virginia? Who's the linebacker or whatever? I don't remember. But Shane Morris, and then there was that Michael Ferns. That's who it was, Michael Ferns. It always seems like that first guy ends up somewhere else. I mean, I know that's not necessarily true. But, that defensive end, Stephen Herron from Stanford, he was an early guy. I don't think he was the first, but that's how that sometimes goes. One guy who's probably quite possibly going to get drafted, and he had a nice redemption year, and that's Chuck Filiaga. He played for the Minnesota Golden Gophers this last year. He appeared in all 13 games. He was a starter at guard. He had 849 snaps and 786 were on offense, and he played 63 on special teams. Good for him, man. He waited his entire career to get out there and then just could not secure a position. And then when it seemed like he started to, ironically, at Minnesota in 2020, he ended up getting injured, I believe, and losing his job to Trevor Keegan, or they just tried out Trevor Keegan. I don't remember exactly how that went. I just remember in that Minnesota game having that different vantage point. There were a couple plays, one pull in particular, that he made such a good block. He was right on the money, and it sprung open this big play. So good for him. We are going to do one more, and then we'll continue down the list. Dan Villari, who transferred to Syracuse. I watched like 2 Syracuse games, and I didn't notice him. Obviously, he wasn't a quarterback. That's because they switched him to tight end. He's playing tight end now. To which it's like, dude, and maybe he wanted to be closer to home, right? He's from New York. Granted, Syracuse is probably not very close to Long Island, but probably closer. But maybe not. I think, like, technically, I think Detroit's closer than Buffalo to New York City, for instance. But I don't remember if that's accurate. That might just be me making something up. But he switched to tight end. He appeared in 7 games, but he only had 1 reception for 22 yards. But still, I mean, if you're going to be a tight end somewhere, why go to Syracuse? Anyway, all right. Well, we'll just continue on here momentarily. But we've got all these other guys to get to. All right. So, Darian Green Warren is a guy who transferred out. He went to Nevada. Remember, he's a California native, played out of Harbor, Narbonne, which is kind of like in by West Covina, I think. He appeared in 12 games for the Wolfpack. He had 5 tackles and 1 pass broken up. So did not a ton. Sounds like he didn't have very many snaps, so it was just kind of more garbage time. But he was out there, and disappointing that when you see a guy like that with that much potential, you want to see it be more like Andre Seldon, right? His classmate, where it's he goes and then he thrives. But not such the case yet for Darian Green Warren. Anthony Solomon transferred to Arizona. He didn't do a heck of a lot. He playing under transferred there. Don Brown was there when he transferred there. But then I think Don Brown left before he even played a snap, if that all works to my memory, which it may or may not be accurate. He appeared in 6 games, had 1 tackle, and a kickoff return for -5 yards. So not a lot for him either, which is disappointing, especially because Michigan, the way it recruited him, it re-recruited him. Like they were high on him. He was high on Michigan. Something fell off along the way, and then to the 2018 Ohio State game happened, and they were like, we need speed on defense. And they went and they were like, we need this guy. So it's disappointing that hasn't worked out yet for him. Center Nolan Rumler, who was another guy that I was really excited about, one of the first to commit out of Akron Archbishop Hoban. He ended up going to Kent State. He played in 5 games, had 49 snaps, mostly on the offense. I think he was dealing with some injuries, but he didn't, because he didn't play a lot, or he was coming in replacing some with injuries. Hard to find info on some of those types of guys, right, when they're playing at a smaller school. Cornell Wheeler, another linebacker. A lot of linebackers who left. He went to Kansas. He appeared in 11 games, had 103 snaps, but all of them were on special teams. He didn't register any stats. So He hasn't done anything under Lance Leopold in Kansas. Joe Milton. If you don't know what Joe Milton's done, you're living under a rock. He went from having some of the most boneheaded plays. I think that was late last season when he ran out of bounds when they needed, with the time expiring, when they just needed to score. He was rounded into form, taking over for Hendon Hooker, especially considering, I mean, it's quite the redemption story because he was the starter back in 2021, got injured / usurped by Hendon Hooker, who played okay, and then Hendon Hooker comes out as the starter this year and has a Heisman-worthy campaign before his injury. Joe Milton comes in and suddenly looks great, particularly in the Orange Bowl. He was in 9 games. He completed nearly 65% of his passes for 971 yards. That's 53 for 82. He had 10 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He also ran 18 times for 77 yards, and he won the MVP of the Capital One Orange Bowl against Clemson. And he is the starter with the Tennessee Volunteers going into next season. That's impressive. And I know I wish nothing but the best for Joe, but I know some people maybe don't feel that way given some of his comments on the way out. But I still talk to Joe every now and again. I still like him a lot. Giles Jackson. Now we're getting into some names here. He obviously plays for Washington. He appeared in all 13 games. He had 28 receptions for 328 yards and a touchdown. He also rushed 9 times for 48 yards, 5 punt returns for 45 yards, and 15 kickoff returns for 312 yards. Not too bad. Still, it hasn't necessarily become who everyone thought he was going to be, which is disappointing. Ben Van Sumeren. Not exactly a fan favorite over here. He was the 3rd leading tackler for Michigan State. He played in 11 games. He had 81 tackles. He had 2 sacks, 2 passes broken up, and 3 quarterback hurries. But guess what he didn't do? Anything against Michigan. So, there you are. I don't know that he played in that game, but I don't think he did. Now, here would be my candidate for the Joe Burrow. But Michigan fans aren't going to be upset about it, just like probably Ohio State fans probably weren't that upset about Joe Burrow because they had Justin Fields. Michigan isn't going to be upset about losing Zach Charbonnet because they have Blake Corum. But he appeared in 10 games. He had 1,359 yards rushing, 14 touchdowns, had 37 passes for the 321 yards. So, again, a guy that he was not intending on transferring. Then he got home and just realized, like, I was not cut out for this Michigan gray, this Michigan weather. And I'm like, you and I both, man. And I know there's a lot of other rumors about all these other things about his playing time and stuff like that. It literally is simply that. And trust me on that. But there's no, well, actually, I heard he made a kind of dig at Michigan, but I just think that that's what college football has become. You make a dig at your former place. But I know that his family still has a lot of love for Michigan. I still talk to his stepdad here and there about what Michigan, he wants to know what's going on in Michigan, keeping in mind his stepdad, giant Michigan fan from Ohio, and stepdad, that is. And yeah, I mean, pretty amazing. I mean, he's right there, similar stats as Blake Corum. So I think that Michigan fans wish him the best, and now he's going into the draft. Another name Michigan fans probably should know, starting center for Indiana, is Zach Carpenter. He played in 10 games, including the Michigan game. Had played in all and had almost 700 snaps. So another guy who I believe was trying to move closer to home, even though I think he was an Ohio native. Speaking of Indiana, Christian Turner, who just transferred this offseason to from Wake Forest to Indiana. But at Wake Forest, he had 12 games, rushed 128 times for 516 yards, 7 touchdowns. Also caught 5 passes for 39 yards and a touchdown. So he is rounding into form. So it'll be interesting to see how Michigan handles him and how Indiana handles him, because I think, he might be ready for the show. Buford, Georgia's own Christian Turner. Another guy Michigan saw this year is George Caratan at UConn. He was a former walk-on at Michigan. He has now gone to 4 schools. He's doing the Ayabioki route. Played at Arkansas. He played at some D2 or FCS school or something like that. And now he's at UConn. He punted 67 times. I don't think you care that much about the stats of a punter, no offense. Jalen Kelly Powell played at UConn. Sorry, not UConn, Akron. He was in 6 games and had 18 tackles, a sack, and a quarterback hurry. He's still always he likes a lot of the pictures that I post of Michigan on Instagram. So he's still paying attention. Miles Sims was starting cornerback at Georgia Tech. He had 43 tackles in 12 games. Interception, 3 passes broken up, and a tackle for loss. Oliver Martin, we saw him come to town with Nebraska. Played in 12 games for the Huskers, registered 11 catches, had 195 yards and a touchdown. People were more excited about Oliver Martin. A lot of people were just as excited about him as they were Donovan Peoples-Jones, Tariq Black, and Nico Collins. And he has not lived up to the billing, which is disappointing. 2 guys that are probably very little known. One of them is Jordan Castleberry. He was a walk-on. He initially transferred to Maryland. Now he's at UT Martin. He was in 11 games as a running back, had 28 carries for 148 yards, and 1 catch for 25 yards. So not playing a lot, but I mean, he was an Ohio native, and was one of my favorite guys on the team when he was around. Just like great personality. Last one's another running back, and that is Gage Garcia. Went to the same high school as Julian Fleming, and he came in 2020 year, and he pieced out afterwards. Well, he is playing at Lehigh Mountain, and he rushed 129 times for 618 yards, had 4 touchdowns, also reeled in 11 pass receptions for 70 yards. That is what your former Wolverines are doing at their new schools. So that's going to do it for us today. We'll probably be late again tomorrow because I have a dental surgery appointment to figure out this whole jaw situation in the middle of the day, in the middle of a snowstorm. But we'll be back. And then mailbag, we'll resume that again on probably Friday. I'm going to try to we're going to have Nicole Auerbach on either this week or next week. And we're going to try to do that maybe Thursday. We'll figure that out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We will be back soon. Peace.